Hello everybody, this is Santa Jerry from Santa Switch Adapted Toys, and we're here today. We're going to adapt up this BeatBo. So the BeatBo and the BeatBelle are exactly the same in all their operation. I've just fixed up the BeatBelle and got ready to go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fix it so that the record button, music button, and learning button all can be switch adapted by cables putting into the back. So we've got that one done. And we're going to go to work on BeatBo here. The tools that I'm going to be using and parts. I have some stereo cables made up. Now you see I have 5 of them here. I want to demonstrate something on how to make up stereo cables to become mono cables. So I made up a box. When you open up a stereo cable, you've got 3 wires inside. And these 3 wires, in this particular case, happen to be red, blue, and black. And the question is, which one of those is the tip, which one is the sleeve, and which one is the ring, so we can make a reliable stereo cable out of it. This one, when you opened it up, happened to be white, red, black. We don't know. I've made up 3 cables because now I have a tester that in these for this particular cable, and it might not be the same all the way across the board, but for this particular cable it proved out to be red and black go together and blue is separate. And that's what it is on all 3 of these. These are the 3 I'm going to use for the toy, but I wanted to demonstrate. I'm going to link to a video that I've made how to use this, or basically how to tell which wires get combined together. If you cross wires and you get a light, you know that one of those is the tip and the other one is either the sleeve or the ring, because that's the only way that's going to light up. We put these 2 together, we do not get a light. See, so what do we have? We have light with the white and the red. We're going to get a light with the white and the black. And we have no light with the red and the black. So when I'm making this up to make a mono cable for use in switch adapted toys, these get spun together, soldered together to make up a cable. And now when we put these we touch them, we know that both lights are going to light up because the tip is now talking to the ring and the sleeve. That circuit will be completed. Set that to the side. We can do the same thing with this as a test with none of the wires connected together yet. I'm going to put together the red and the blue. We get a light. I'm going to put together the blue and the black, and we get a light. I'm going to put together the red and the blue. I already did that. Wait a minute. Let's put together the red and the black. No light. Twist these together, solder them up. We now have a reliable mono cable for the use in switch adapted toys. So pull this out of the way. These all 3 have been made up. When I do these, I solder them together so that they're ready to put into a toy. I make them up. I got a batch of them that's for my adapting purposes, and every one is reliable. So again, there's that video I'll link to. So we have those. We have a toy that we want to adapt. Tweezers that I found. These are reverse tweezers. When you get a hold of something, now you've got a hold of it and it won't let go. This is, I'll tell you what, Amazon purchased there, made it great. Cordless battery operated screwdriver saves the hand, wire strippers, and some cutters for some fine tuning on the wiring when it's done. So now on this toy we need to figure out how many remote switches we're going to have for the user to be able to have input. And when this toy is activated, it has the opportunity to play music. It has the opportunity to do some other interactive 1, 2, 3 stuff. And every time on this particular toy, if you punch an input, it interrupts and changes the program. So, music or ABC 1, 2, 3. It also has the ability to record your voice.
When my tummy turns red, say something and I'll sing it back. Get ready.
Hello everybody, welcome to Santa's Switch Adapted Toys. Okay, that's...
Listen to the beat and move your feet.
Okay. So,
Please dance.
another thing that we just did, by the way, and I should have mentioned, we always test the toy to make sure that it works. We don't want to get involved in something and discover that something's not working and then realize, wait a minute, was the toy working before I started? Okay, so we've tested the toy, it does work. And we're determining what we're going to put these switches to. There's also a switch, an input on the belly. I'm not going to do that because I could not. I opened this toy up and it was too difficult to get to the switches on the belly, so it's not going to happen. But I think that the user is going to be very, very happy with the inputs that we're going to choose here. So with these 3 cables, we are going to put all 3 of these buttons as the ability for the user to do something. Already taken the screws out of the bottom. There's 5 in here to hold this base on. Check the batteries and all that. Turned it off for this because we don't necessarily want it activating. And we're going to take it apart. By pushing the record button, it pops right out. On the record button, on the red button, there's this pad. This pad could come out of there. It usually does not. Don't lose it. This is the pad that interacts with this circuit board mounted switch. And when that touches that, that's what makes the toy work. If you don't have that and you put this back together, there's no contact. It's not going to work. So, parts, oh, I forgot to mention, always have little cups handy available parts bin. Okay? Those are the parts that I need to put the base back together with that switch. This will be here in a moment. The other 2 switches are mounted a little further up into the body. And we're going to just set this on the back for the moment. They're underneath this plate. So let's remove 1 screw. And 2 screws. Okay. Now these screws on this particular toy, I believe they're the same, but just in case one was smaller and one larger, it's always best to keep track of what goes where so you don't strip something out or discover it's not working. That circuit board is now available for us to do. The moment that I set this down, these 2 are going to come out. Note there's an orientation registration of these 2 blue projections that hold those in place, and you also see that we have that same soft silicone type switch in there, but let's go ahead and just move those into the parts bucket. These have to be put back in conjunction with this. So we have 2 more big decisions to make. One, where are we going to put holes to get into the body to run these cables? How do we want the cables running in? I got, oh, there, that fell down. The 3 cables. And the second thing is, where are we going to attach these cables to when we get inside? So the answers to that are, we are not going to attach it. We are not going to attach it to this circuit switch. It is very difficult to do. Instead, manufacturer has given us the ability to attach it to, let's see if we got them here, one of these 3 solder points. That's what we're going to use, those 3 solder points, okay? On that, for those 2 buttons. Here, we'll turn it over and we'll take a look. I pointed out earlier that this is the, right here is the printed circuit switch. Very difficult to attach to that. And the other thing, sometimes people try to attach to these because they see that and think that's where it's going to be. And you can do it. It's difficult, but you can do it. But the moment you do that, you can no longer use the factory switches. And I like putting the toy back into service, fully using the factory user switches as well as our switch adapters that we're going to put on. But if you trace this switch out, you'll find that it comes over to these 2 inside points on the solder plate. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 contacts there. They feed off to these 8 wires that go to the brain. We're going to use these 2 here because those 2 are the ones that are associated with that switch. And when you solder something here, that switch is still usable. Okay, so that's one characteristic. The second thing we need to do is, like I said, first off, where are we going to attach them? Second, how are we going to get the cables inside the body? So for getting cables inside the body on this particular toy, I would like to put 2 of them over here, representing the 2 switches that we're going to be activating. I would like to put one of them over here to represent the switch that's being activated there. So I'm going to drill a hole here and 2 holes here. They're going to be on the back side of the battery compartment, but they won't interfere with putting the toy back together. So let's get our cables installed. I like using a drill. You can use something else if you want. If you use a drill, try not to put your finger behind it. That's bad form, and it also leaves a hole in your finger. Oh, and careful you don't overextend your drill bit so that it cuts into the wiring. That takes a lot of work to try and put that back together. I've done it. I don't like it, so there's 2 holes and the 3rd one over here. And again, we're going to make sure we don't injure ourselves or the toy by drilling those holes in. Feed wires. 1. 2. You see I'm pulling a lot of wire in there, and you see why in a moment. It just makes it easier to work with while I'm doing this inside. So I need to tie these strain relief knot in each of these cables. Wires, cables, I'm going to use those intermittently to describe both of these, although those are wires and a bundle of wires is a cable. So I need it to reach across here because I know that my solder points are over here. I need a little bit of extra to make sure that it gets around that battery box and doesn't interfere with anything. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to turn it around because I'm right-handed. I want to be able to tie the knot this way. Some people use zip ties and things. I had in the past done that myself. This reaches across well now because I know that my solder point's up in there. Okay, and with all that cable inside, it really makes it easy to do these knots instead of having to struggle to do something right next to a case. I want a little bit more. If you have room inside the body, having a little excess cable inside is not a problem. And if the toy you're working on is kind of restricted, I've also discovered that even the most restricted toy that I have, which is really compact inside, I can still put a knot in it and make that cable work. So that's good. Got some slack, and we have some slack. Okay, I got to set the toy down so we can get to our solder points. Okay. So we have 3 switches we're going to, or yeah, 3 cables for connecting up to make remote switches, solder points. I had mentioned, I'll pick these up to the camera too when I'm done soldering so you can see how poorly I solder. I mean how well I can do. And if I can do this up, I'm sure that with a little practice you can do it too. Okay. So I have soldering iron. I forgot to mention soldering iron. Of all the tools that we talked about, soldering iron, I have an extraction system. I modified this up so that my extra solder is right in front of the extraction. Extraction's turned on. I'm sure you can hear that noise now. And I don't know. Can I zoom in? This will be a fun thing to try. No, it's not the right way. If I zoom in, can I give you a better shot of this without messing things up too bad? Wow, look at that. And maybe that. No. Bring it back over here and see if this will give you something in hiding. Okay. No, I can't see. Okay. All right, we'll zoom in. Okay. So I said I'm going to use the first 2 because when I trace out that circuit board, those wires come over to those first 2 contact points. Let's get a little solder on the iron. I like priming it or getting it something on there, and do either one of these. It doesn't matter which first. There's one. And it doesn't matter which one of these go to because all we're doing is adding a remote contact for it. And hold on a second. I didn't get. Let me clean off my soldering iron. Reposition my solder. Get a little dot on there. Did that go? Yes, it did. Voila. So that's soldered in place. The next ones are on this circuit board. And for that, I'm going to bring down my helping hand. Circuit board. When you look at this circuit board, it has, let's see, that's not in frame. Let me change it up a bit. That makes it kind of in frame, doesn't it? Let's see. Maybe better? Okay. And I don't want the reflection back at you. I want you to be able to see these without having a glare. Okay, so let's trace them out. On this circuit board we have the switch, the button switch, and this wire goes between the both of them. When we look at very carefully on the circuit board, the wire that goes between the both of them also leaves this one under, there's some paint here, and comes back over to this side, the inside tab. This side of this switch goes over to the outside tab, And the center tab, soldering point, goes to this side of the switch. So that tells me that there's this contact point is dedicated, only goes to that switch. So that is going to be my one of my points. The middle tab only goes to this switch. That's going to be the other side of the other switch I'm going to be putting on. And because these are both common, this is a common connector here, and it comes back over here, this is the common. I'm going to put one wire from each of my cables. I'm going to zoom out so you can see the cables. Let's see if I can zoom out and bring the whole thing in a little bit. Okay, so here's the two cables that I ran through the body to act for these other two switches. I'm going to bring one of those, one side of one cable to the outside switch, the first switch, and we're going to solder that on. Let's see. Let me think about how I want to do this. There's another consideration that I have before I get to the point of soldering, and that is when I put these buttons in and turn this back over, I'm going to have what orientation would be a front and a back button. I'm not going to move everything around because I've got things set up right now, but on here the music button is the back button, and the 1, 2, 3 ABC button is the front button of the toy. So the front button of the toy is going to be activated by this switch. Okay, so this is the switch that I want to put my front cable to. I put two cables in side by side. I want to put the front cable there. So logic, when somebody's using this toy, they could say, oh look, I want to use the front switch. How do I put it so that it's there only? Well, if we put this on here logically, their first guess might be right. I've got to move my station a little bit because it's over the top of there. Okay. You swear everyone's still in frame, but my hand is in the way of the light. What I was concerned about was I was going to get some solder on my soldering iron, and if I accidentally dropped it, it would fall into onto the circuit board of the other foot. So I didn't want that to happen. So there's one. That is the front button. The other switch, the back switch, is the middle position on this array of soldering possibilities, and so we're going to put that one in there on number 2 on the middle. Okay, so that's the two switches. The yellow one and the orange one are now soldered on for one side of it, but we need to complete the circuit by adding these two together. And this goes on the common. And we can put them together here because we know that the factory made them common because the factory said this is common to both switches. This is what we're actually putting this to. Rather than trying to solder it on the board over here and interrupt things, we're going to solder it on the factory given common point, which is this. I hold it there after removing the soldering iron because I want it to cool. If I was shifting it around, it might make for a brittle solder that would fall off easy because it was in movement during solidifying. Okay, so we have front button going to the front, back button going to the what I think is the back, and the two commons in place. So the soldering is all done. Now, putting everything back together and testing it. Let's move this out of the way. We can turn off the background and start reassembly. Reassembly. Move my light up a little bit. I'm going to put this in first. So, mindful of those registration tabs that they've given us, those stand-up points. We'll set these in place. And you have a tendency, by the way, to put your hand underneath this to support yourself, and look, it moves things around. I have put these back together where this was bound up, and you don't want that. You want to have nice freedom here. We're going to roll this over. See, I'm doing it again. My hand is pushing it up. It's out. I want to make sure that those are naturally set there, so I'm going to grab the body instead of the base down here. Put this in, and then reach over the top and find the two screws. See if there's enough magnet on my screwdriver to put this back together. You know what I should have done? Let's do this. Let's zoom out. I apologize, folks. I'm working on the toy, not looking back at the camera for your view. Let's go back to this again. What you probably did see, you saw me talking about wondering why doesn't he show it. Okay, so we're going to put these switches back in, and I'm going to be mindful of these registration. Oops. Okay. Be mindful of the registration tabs and the fact that they could fall right through. I have to go to the floor to pick up that other one, and I'm going to show you something you have to be very careful of. So I picked up the switch off the floor, and I'm ready to put it back into place, and here it is. Got it. Goes right there. That registration tab. Okay, you're yelling at me, and you should be, because right now, this is where you've noticed, hey, Santa, you forgot that little tab. When this thing fell on the floor, that fell out. If I just picked up the orange button and put it in, I would have a non-functioning toy. Okay, so we got that back together. Making sure that things are lined up right and screwed in. Okay, so this is a good time to check the movement of these. If the pads are going down, I put one back together earlier and this was bound up and I had to take it apart. Not a big deal, but yeah, if you can stop it from doing that, that's better. Okay, so now we're getting ready to put this on, and this requires. This goes in first. And again, there's a registration tab in here that says that's the direction it goes. You want to make sure this isn't pushed up. It's nice and slack and placed. And putting this back together, you want to make sure this cable is pulled into this side of the battery compartment. That way it doesn't interfere with our switch out there. And that goes in, and there we go. I'm going to put a couple of screws in just to hold it in place while we do our testing. A lot of toys you can test without having to reassemble it fully, but on this toy, because of those two buttons there, they have to be in place, and it's best just to go ahead and do that. And then again with this other button, the same thing. We have freedom of movement. We have 3 cables sticking out. Let's zoom out a little, out a little bit, and spotlight this. I have some off-screen, I don't know how far off screen they are. You can see my hand miraculously appearing from the other side of the table. I have two buttons that I've mounted to the side, switches rather, that I've mounted to the side so that I can test toys as they go. Normally I don't need four or more than two, so I brought one of my switches over. These are the switches that I fix up and sell on to the media, to the community. Let's see, we can't see it anymore. Let's bring it around this side. So, off camera, the two switches that are behind over here, one of them is going to be front and back, front bit switch, the other one's going to be back switch, and then this one's going to be the red. Let's turn it on. Oops. This is a rather finicky switch. Okay. So,
Dance party!
this is the factory switches. Music.
When my tummy turns
Want to
red,
record.
say something, and I'll sing it back.
And we can interrupt that by punching one of the other buttons.
Are you ready to... Okay.
Okay.
Let's shake it up. John.
Let's test ours.
When my tummy turns red, say something, and I'll sing it back. Get ready.
Hey, thanks for watching this video, folks.
Hey, thanks for watching this video,
Let's test it.
Listen to the beat and move your feet.
We've interrupted the music one with the music remote. We've interrupted with the
Freeze dance. When the
1, 2,
music
3.
stops, you freeze. Ready to wiggle.
This toy is ready to ship. Look at that. Everything works just like it's supposed to.
One, when my tummy turns red, say some hey.
Factory switches work.
Dance. Let's sing about colors.
Okay,
Red,
so
orange,
here's Santa Jerry's opinion on whether you, when you switch a toy, if you switch it exclusively for switch adapted purposes or keep it with the factory switches. If something goes wrong with one of your switches and you don't know whether it's the switch or the toy, and the factory switches don't work because someone has defeated them, then you really don't have any idea whether it was the switch that's defunct, that has is defective, or whether it was the toy that was defective. So with this configuration, it's easy to tell. If it operates without the switch, then the switch is defective. If it doesn't operate at all, then change the batteries. And the other aspect to it is, I always considered the fact that special needs families are families. There's going to be some other children in the family that might want to help the child that needs the help. And if the regular able-bodied child can operate these type of things, I turned it off, but they can operate these type of things, then they can interact with their brother or their sibling. And so it was important to me to do that. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you learned something. You have a wonderful day.